Well, good evening and welcome. This past summer, while organizing hiking photos and reading through corresponding logs, I realized that specific preparation for leading winter hikes was missing from our leadership training. Our current leadership program is designed mainly for three-season hiking. Yes, there's some overlap with winter conditions. The winter workshop introduces participants to winter hiking, as well as group management differences from three-season hiking. But the workshop is not meant to prepare someone to lead a winter hike. Leading a winter hike has challenges very different from leading a three-season hike. I believe that winter leaders should get more upfront information and guidance rather than learning critical skills through trial and error. Since we now have a good number of active and potential winter leaders, this seemed like the right time to talk about what's different when leading hikes in winter. Before I begin, I'd like to share a bit about my winter hiking and leading background. I've been winter hiking for over 25 years and led AMC winter hikes mostly in the New Hampshire White Mountains for about 15 of those years. I got into winter hiking soon after joining SEM in 1994, taking several AMC courses as well as courses from International Mountain Climbing School. This was before the internet was everywhere, long before the iPhone existed, and 14 years before microspikes came on the market. So yes, I sometimes feel a bit ancient.
Mm.
As part of one IMCS winter course, we climbed Mount Washington. This was my first winter climb of the mountain, and since then I have summited it several more times in winter, along with reaching the summit of all of New Hampshire's 4,000 foot or higher mountains in winter. I've also done some mountaineering out west on Mounts Hood and Rainier. This presentation is based on my own winter hiking leadership experience, the mentoring I've received, and research on the subject. Except for the current one, all of the photos in this presentation were taken by me. The overall goal I have for the presentation is to explore key differences between leading a winter hike versus a non-winter hike. Another goal I have is to convey why one would want to lead a winter hike. Leading a winter hike offers unique rewards that include enjoying snow-covered landscapes, stunning photo opportunities, a strong sense of accomplishment, and a chance to sharpen leadership, decision-making, and risk management skills. You're giving people a chance to see how rewarding it is to embrace the winter season rather than hiding from it. Sadly, climate change is making winter a disappearing season in the Northeast, with overall snowfall declining despite occasional intense storms. This makes it important to enjoy winter hiking now while we still can. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the chat and I'll do my best to answer them during the Q&A at the end. Diane Sims will be assisting me in managing that part. I've put together a set of documents that includes what I call cliff notes of the presentation. They're pretty detailed, and I'll make that available at the end of the presentation. Winter is one of my favorite times of the year to hike. Some of my best and memorable hikes as a leader or with friends have been in winter. This photo is an example of one of several hikes that I had what I call Goldilocks conditions. Everything was just right. Temperature in the mid-20s, little or no wind, a very recent dump of snow, trail already packed out, and other groups of people having come and gone. It was one of those kind of hikes that made you wish for more time to enjoy this magical, otherworldly place. But with daylight fading quickly, you can't afford to linger too long if you want to make it back before dark. And although I had done this winter hike before, it was not as memorable as this time. Here's an outline of what I plan to cover. First, a high-level 10,000-foot look at the key differences between leading a winter hike versus a three-season hike. Then I'll drill down to discuss trip planning considerations for a winter hike and offer some suggestions when you're on the trail. We'll look at factors that contribute to turning a group around with some actual examples of when and why I had to do that. I will share some incidents I experienced illustrating some things that happened unexpectedly or went wrong on a winter hike. I'll mention some opportunities for further education and experience, and finally give you a list of what documents are in the handout. So, what are the key differences with leading a winter hike? Well, weather is one of them, an obvious one. It tends to be more unpredictable and severe, particularly for New Hampshire White Mountain hikes. I'm convinced the weather gods take the summer off and then, for their own entertainment, wake up in the winter and spring just to mess with hike leaders and hikers. There are shorter daylight hours that increase the risk of finishing after dark. There's the risk of hypothermia and frostbite. The Mount Washington Observatory notes that the average midwinter temperature on the summit is about 5 degrees. Hurricane force winds occur almost every other day. There are only about 10 to 15 acceptable days to summit the mountain in calendar winter. Acceptable being defined as temperatures in the teens or higher and winds 40 miles per hour or less. In addition to creating wind chills, wind can occur on clear and sunny days above tree line, capable of knocking you over or creating whiteout conditions. Now, I don't expect that most of you will plan a winter hike to the summit of Mount Washington, but the severity of its weather filters down to a lesser degree to the lower New Hampshire summits, as well as other locations in New England. Even in Massachusetts, we have cold temperatures with significant wind chills. When planning a winter hike to lead, flexibility with the weather becomes important. Unfortunately, this tends to clash with the AMC model of scheduling a hike for a specific date weeks in advance. Trail conditions are different. Trails are snow-covered or icy, as shown here. Navigation can be difficult without visible markers. Trail breaking deep snow is exhausting and requires enough people to share the work required. Streams may or may not be bridged. Getting wet from falling into a stream fully or partially can be life-threatening. In the mountain areas, there's the avalanche risk. This slide shows just a sampling of the special gear often required for winter hiking. Other gear not shown includes goggles, mittens, extra insulating layers, and face protection. The added gear makes gear failure more likely on a winter hike than other seasons. Participants new to winter hiking often need assistance with handling their winter gear. You need a larger backpack capable of carrying the extra gear. On the actual hike day, changes in required gear may be necessary based on ground and weather conditions. Group management. Smaller groups are preferred in winter for a variety of reasons, like setting a comfortable pace, staying together, and easier monitoring of how everyone is doing. You need to be more aware of the impact on your group of changing weather and ground conditions. There's no getting around that leading a winter hike comes with more risk than one in summer, and that's why it's so important to make good and prudent decisions related to group safety. Emergency situations. Emergency situations caused by accidents are more dangerous in winter due to trail and weather conditions. They may be more difficult to respond to in a timely manner by search and rescue. Injuries or delays can become life-threatening quickly due to cold exposure. The ability to call for help may be compromised by dying batteries in remote locations. More emergency gear must be carried to keep the injured person warm. And don't forget that the non-injured people in the group need to be prepared for standing around for a period of time while the injured person is attended to. All of these differences require adjustments and changes to how you plan a winter hike versus a three-season hike. So now let's drill down a little bit. Trail selection. If you're relatively new to leading winter hikes or contemplating becoming a winter leader, start by being conservative in your objectives. Stick to well-marked and well-used trails to avoid navigational issues. You may want to avoid trails with major brook crossings. Have a backup hike in case weather or trail conditions are not favorable. Loops work well. long out and back trails can limit bailout options. For White Mountain hikes, if you have less experienced participants or weather that is more severe above tree line, stick to below tree line trails and destinations. This photo was taken on an AMC snowshoe hike with another chapter. At times, it seemed like a trip from hell, or perhaps more accurately, a trip to hell. Most of it was on the Hancock Notch Trail in the White Mountains. The trail conditions were simply awful. As pictured here, there were several challenging stream crossings over rapidly moving water with ice shelves and questionable snow ice bridges. We also had to bushwhack when the trail disappeared, which was difficult with our snowshoes that had extensions attached to them. This hike was obviously not pre-hiked in winter conditions. It turned out to be what we call an exploratory hike. Neither leader has done it before in these conditions. I strongly recommend pre-hiking your planned winter hike. For many years, this was an unwritten SCM rule for leading a winter hike prior to it being posted online. There are several benefits to pre-hiking. It gives you confidence in the skill level required for the hike, which could be quite different than what is required in non-winter conditions. It aids you in screening participants since you have firsthand knowledge of what the hike will be like, the physical demands, the gear requirements. It can provide firsthand knowledge of trail conditions, potential difficult stream crossings, reroutes, blowdowns forcing off-trail travel. You can note navigational issues due to markers on rocks, trees, cairns, or ledges that may be covered up by snow. And finally, you can determine if the trailhead parking lot is plowed in winter, or for local hikes in Massachusetts, whether a DCR gate is open in winter. For local hikes, be aware of trails that are known to have frequent running water that turns to ice in winter. For example, in the Blue Hills, Northern Skyline Trail coming down Hancock Hill towards the DCR headquarters. The ledges there can build up some pretty impressive ice. In your outdoor connector hike description, I would include a disclaimer like the following. And I note that a lot of people, a lot of leaders are using this now. To address unforeseen challenges such as adverse weather and unacceptable trail conditions, the planned trip destination, meeting place, or date may be modified. In that event, participants may elect to opt out. This statement attempts to address the need for flexibility in leading a winter hike. Discuss with your co-leader your trip destination, the trip goals, preferred group size, and work with them to develop an emergency action plan. Ideally, a winter hike with 6 or more participants has 3 co-leaders. One person at the front who serves as the trail finder. They set the pace and handle navigation. A second leader serves as the sweep, and a third leader mingles among the participants to monitor how they are doing. This need for a mingler, as I call it, is dependent on the number of participants and their experience level. Alternatively, you can get by with 2 leaders by recruiting a participant to fill the sweep position, letting the other co-leader mingle in the group. Co-leaders can switch off later in the hike. An additional advantage of having a third co-leader is the situation where someone has to return to the trailhead as a result of a minor accident, an equipment failure, the hike is too strenuous, not feeling well, and so forth. One co-leader could accompany them to the trailhead, and the hike could continue with the other 2 co-leaders. Set a group size. In general, keep the group size, including leaders, to 10 or fewer. White Mountain wilderness areas restrict group size to no more than 10, and a minimum group size of 6 is recommended for winter hikes to adequately cover emergency situations. A larger group, say 10 to 13, may be desirable if trail breaking is expected. In general, though, the larger the group, the slower the pace. It's also more difficult to keep the group together. With smaller groups, it's easier to monitor how everyone is doing with check-ins. The co-leader that mingles among the group should be looking for signs of fatigue, hypothermia, and frostbite. Weather and trail conditions. After you've selected your hike and posted it, it's important to monitor weather and trail conditions during the days leading up to your hike. Monitor weather forecasts from multiple sources. Weather.gov covers a broad area, Mountain Forecast and the Mount Washington Observatory covers the whites. The observatory provides a higher summit forecast, which is useful if your hike is above tree line and exposed, which is roughly, I don't know, around a dozen of the 48 4,000 footers fall into that category. If the wind chill on Mount Washington is predicted to be between 35 and 50 degrees below zero, the observatory issues a wind chill advisory. If it's below minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit on the summit, they issue a wind chill warning. They also will consider in issuing those advisories a rapid temperature drop between the summit and its base and other factors such as thick fog, icing, and poor visibility. I often will extrapolate the temperature and wind from where I'm going and use the wind chill chart to get frostbite times. And this is helpful in determining whether the hike is a go or not. In general, all-day beginner winter hikes should try to be in the range of 10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above zero. And I would avoid locations where the wind chill temperature could be colder than negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. What about the wind? Well, winds up to 40 miles per hour are generally manageable in exposed areas, but winds sustained or gusting above that can knock you off balance. Forecasts often underestimate wind on peaks, ridges, and cols. Regarding trail conditions, look at trail reports on New England trail conditions and all trails. Also, Facebook hiking groups can give you clues as to whether certain trails are broken out. Getting the snow depth where you're hiking is useful to know, and you can usually get this information from the National Weather Service and possibly ski slope websites. If your hike crosses streams, are they still bridged or are they open? If Mount Pierce or Jackson is your destination, the AMC Highland Center front desk can give you current conditions, such as whether it's packed out or night. Be prepared to change your required gear due to changes in trail conditions. And finally, the weather forecast may force you to cancel, postpone, or implement your posting disclaimer to do an alternate hike in a different location and or on a different day. The forecast can also impact the travel plans of participants planning to stay overnight before the hike, as well as those traveling on the day of the hike. This can be a challenging decision to make, particularly if there are borderline hiking and traveling conditions. If you do decide to go forward with the hike, inform participants of what conditions they can expect and send them a link to the latest forecast. Group and safety management, screening. For participants you don't know, follow up with a phone call. A phone call allows a friendly, interactive conversation and a better sense of whether the trip is a good fit, something that email alone can't offer. Some important things to ask them, in addition to what we currently have on our trip screening form, is their experience with snowshoes and microspikes. You can also utilize a feature in OC that allows you to review other hikes the applicant has done. If you have any nagging doubts, you may want to contact the leader of another hike they did. If you feel that they're not qualified for the hike, be prepared to suggest a trip that they might be better suited for. The quality and thoroughness of your screening is a key aspect to a successful winter hike. On the day of the hike, if one person is clearly not qualified for the hike, they're not going to have a good time. And plus, the other participants might become annoyed with you for accepting them on the hike. Set a turnaround time for the hike. Since days are shorter, calculate a turnaround time based on sunset time. Include a winter buffer of time that might be needed for a slower paced group, for gear repairs, etc. Discuss with your co-leaders what emergency gear should be carried. I have a list of recommended winter-specific extra gear in the handout. Given winter weather and conditions, it's very important for groups to stay together. I can't overemphasize that. It's important to stay together. My observation over the years of SCM and other AMC chapters winter hikes is that keeping a group together has been and is a challenge for leaders. Each member of a group contributes to the overall resources of the entire group. If your destination is a New Hampshire 4,000-foot mountain, chances are someone in the group, maybe even you, is peak bagging. But as a leader, safety for the entire group is more important than bagging a summit. Splitting a group so that some people can reach a summit compromises the safety of the entire group. And here's why. In the event of an accident, subgroups have fewer people to assist in evacuating the victim should that become necessary. They may have less emergency gear to work with. Another consideration is that the subgroup not going to the stated destination does not want to stand around getting cold by waiting for the other group to return. They will want to start heading back to the trailhead immediately. But accidents happen more often on the descent when muscles are tired, balance takes more effort, and focus is less sharp. The only valid reason to split a group is for medical reasons or when someone is simply unable to continue. Based on the trip plan and expected ground conditions, develop the gear list noting what gear will be required. When screening, review the gear requirements, foot gear, boots, and traction devices. If microspikes and/or crampons are required, verify they are sharp or have been sharpened recently. Encourage participants to practice at home using a mirror to leave no skin exposed on their face. This is important if or when it becomes time to layer up completely. Finalize the entire information sheet. Emphasize that there is no guarantee that the group will reach its destination. Explain why that might happen. Unexpected ground conditions, deep drifted snow, blowdowns that you can't go around, unexpected changes in weather. Safety for everyone is always the number one consideration. On the gear list, highlight or bold which items are required. At the top of the gear list in bold print, state that anyone showing up at the trailhead without the required gear may be turned away. Explain to participants that not having all the required items on the list may put themselves, as well as the group, at risk. If you or your co-leader have extra headgear like balaclavas and face masks, bring them with you to the trailhead. People just sometimes forget to pack something that turns out to be really important. Navigation. Depending on the hike destination and trail used, be prepared to navigate without clear blazes, particularly in a dense forest or drifted ridges. Pre-hiking can really help with navigation. It's better to make a wrong turn on a pre-hike than on the actual hike where a lot of time could be wasted and your competency called into question. Limit your smartphone's exposure to the cold as battery life is compromised and phones can shut down after just minutes of exposure to below freezing conditions. It happened to me once while trying to show someone a location. Also, avoid using a battery charger to revive a phone that's died from cold exposure. Doing so can permanently damage the battery. Bottom line is, if your phone dies due to the cold, it's useless for the rest of the trip. Don't rely on it as your only navigational tool. Always carry a map and compass and know how to use it. For any above tree line navigation, I strongly recommend calculating at home compass bearings between known points that will get you back to below tree line and to write these down on your paper map. The app iHike GPS, which is one word, is excellent for doing this. This app can do this calculation more accurately than what you could do with a physical map and compass. This slide shows the final step in using the app to display the bearing between 2 points, in this case between the Mount Pierce summit and the intersection of the Webster Cliff Trail and Crawford Path. I drew a couple of oval circles to clarify what you're looking at. The oval near the center is around this trail intersection. Mount Pierce summit is below it and to the left. A yellow line has been drawn from Mount Pierce to the intersection. This is our intended direction of travel. The oval at the top contains the result we are looking for, 50.3 degrees. which is the compass bearing you would use if you needed to hike from Mount Pierce to the intersection. I've included a link in the Cliff Notes to a short YouTube video I've created and it walks you through the steps on how to do this. It looks complicated, but it really isn't. You would repeat this process to get another bearing to use for hiking from the intersection down the Crawford Path to below tree line. Years ago, on an SEM hike to Mount Pierce, the group got caught in a whiteout just after leaving the summit of Mount Pierce, they were heading towards the Crawford Path intersection, intending to follow it to below tree line. They fumbled with a map and compass for about a half an hour to figure out what bearings to follow. Unfortunately, during that time, someone became hypothermic. They had to deal with that once they got down below tree line. So even for a hike to Mount Pierce, which has a limited amount of above tree line hiking, I recommend having those bearings predetermined and written down. Risk management. Be ready to turn back if weather or ground conditions change significantly. In the Whites, weather can change on a dime. We'll talk more about turning back shortly. Know and review the signs of hypothermia. Watch for frostbite. React quickly. This is why smaller groups are better so that you can monitor participants more closely and check in periodically. Watch for participants who might be too hot, too cold, or fatigued. Make sure they're eating and drinking. Slips and falls are the most common hazard for winter hikes. This can happen even when wearing spikes if the spikes are dull or become clogged up with wet snow. Due to time constraints, I won't be covering the handling of emergency situations on a winter hike, but that's an important topic I would encourage you to explore further. Communication and logistics. Leave the trip itinerary and contact info with someone at home. Before the day of the hike, find a group member with a satellite messaging device, for example, a Garmin InReach, Spot, or even a Bivy stick, or a smartphone with satellite communication capability. Note that these devices usually only work if you have a direct line of sight to the sky. On the trail, time management takes on a whole new level of importance in leading a winter hike. The more time spent standing around, the more likely people are to get cold and uncomfortable. Or to put it another way, people need to keep moving to stay warm. As a leader, one of your goals is to minimize non-moving time. Arrive early at the trailhead so that you can greet people as they arrive and check their required gear. When everyone has arrived, announce what roles the co-leaders will fill. Recruit a sweep if necessary. Keep trailhead information brief so that people do not get cold. Send out an email ahead of time with most of the information you normally do in summer. When I was more active leading winter hikes, I usually positioned myself to sweep or mingle so that I could get a feel of how everyone was doing right from the get-go. It also allowed me to check if the other leader's pace was working for everyone. If you're setting the pace, start slow and gradually speed up instead of beginning at your normal pace, which may be too fast for some people. I was also on the lookout for anyone having trouble with their gear, and doing this allowed me to be more sensitive to the needs of the group early on, rather than waiting for problems to develop. During a hike, co-leaders should swap positions with one another since a different leader might observe a problem with a participant that the other co-leader missed. Even though a co-leader may be assigned to mingle among the group, encourage participants to look after one another and speak to a leader if they're having difficulty or notice someone else having trouble. Remind participants that there is no lunch break. They should be getting fluids and grazing throughout the entire hike. To do this, their food and liquids should be easily accessible without having to take off their pack. Another reason to lead a small group is that it helps reduce the number of stops for layer changing. Encourage people to reduce their layers when starting the hike, or as we say, be bold, start cold. You can also plan a stop to layer change before a significant steep section of trail, rather than waiting until you reach the top of that section when people have already started to sweat. For a relatively flat hike after 30 minutes, ask if anyone needs a layer change stop. The point of this is to try and have the group change their layers at the same time rather than stopping every time one participant needs to. Unfortunately, everyone's metabolism is different and clothing choices differ, so winter hikes often do require multiple unavoidable stops to adjust layers. When stopping a group on the trail, encourage participants to get off the trail as much as possible as a courtesy to other users who might want to pass. Gear management. At the trailhead, recommend what footwear should be worn to begin the hike based on the ground conditions. I usually recommend wearing snowshoes even if the trail appears packed down. It's better for the trail and it lightens your backpack. As a general rule of thumb, if you are sinking 2 inches or more, you should wear snowshoes. Think of what happens to the trail if it rains over a 2 inch hole and then freezes. If ground conditions change, stop the entire group and have everyone adjust traction at once to avoid multiple individual stops. If someone is not comfortable on an icy, steep trail section or even scared, reassure them and offer help or have another experienced group member assist. If full face protection is required, check that everyone has all skin covered up. Alternatively, for a larger group, have participants buddy up with the person next to them so that they can check each other. When returning to the trailhead, make sure everyone's car will start before you leave. When to turn around. If you lead many winter hikes, I can almost guarantee over time you will encounter a situation when you feel it is unsafe to continue. Sometimes the decision washed out or closed trail with no alternative, complete loss of visibility, but other times you can get really torn up inside trying to make this decision. Depending on the situation, it might be appropriate and helpful to discuss it with the group. When I helped out with leadership training a couple of years ago, I talked about the acronym FACT, which is applicable to 3-season hikes. But with winter hiking, there is one more important factor to add, which is gear or equipment. So the acronym now is FACET. I wanted to use G in there, but there is, even with the help of ChatGPT, there is no word in the English language that it uses those 5 letters. Facet and also is appropriate because there are many facets to winter hiking. Facet may help you think more objectively and assist you with making the decision to turn around. F is the fun factor. Winter conditions can really impact fun factor. Are we still having fun or has it become a death march with unanticipated conditions? A is for ability. Do we have the energy to continue or have conditions made it too strenuous? C is conditions. Do the trail conditions and weather permit us to continue safely? Is snow on the trail getting deeper, requiring trail breaking? Is it too dangerous to cross the stream? Are we confident we can return safely to the trailhead? And E is for equipment, not having the right equipment or equipment failure. As a leader, did you make the right call for what equipment was required? And T is for time. Changing conditions and ability can slow our pace, affecting time and getting closer to our turnaround time. Having to frequently change foot gear or breaking trail also impacts our pace and time. In this photo, I was co-leading a group on an SCM Franconia Ridge traverse hike. As we ascended towards Mount Haystack, the wind got stronger, visibility deteriorated due to the clouds settling in, and freezing rain was accumulating on everything. You may notice the bit of frost on everyone's outerwear. At this point, my co-leader and I made the decision to turn back. No one objected. Definitely the fun factor was diminishing, conditions were getting worse, with the likelihood that ability and time would become factors when our goggles started to ice up, slowing our pace. So that's like 4 out of 5 of the facet features. And that again, you can look at that and I think it helps you to look at this objectively to make a decision. Some examples. Another example, Mount Cardigan. This photo is a sample of what the trail looked like for quite some distance. I passed a group heading the same way, And on my way down from the summit, I encountered the same group again, but they were heading down. I inquired as to what happened, and they said that several people had trouble with their microspikes not biting into the ice. Upon close examination of their spikes, I observed that they were quite dull. Spikes that should have looked like slightly dull pencil points were a semicircle of metal. In terms of facet, it was clearly an equipment problem. Conditions changed as the trail got steeper, and finally they felt they were having a time problem. So in that case, it was a 3 out of 5 of those conditions. Boarded SCM Mount Musalak hike. It was a very cold day as predicted, so a balaclava, face mask, and goggles were required for this hike. As we climbed, we made several stops to adjust layers, consuming some time. As we got closer to the summit, visibility got worse. When we layered up to cover all skin, I discovered one person without a balaclava or wind mitts. He had only a scarf and regular mittens. As vegetation diminished, the exposure to wind and wind chill increased. Clouds blowing through caused our goggles to fog up. Our pace slowed, and it became obvious that some participants were beginning to have a difficult time. At this point, I proposed that we turn around, to which everyone was in agreement. And I think in this case, it was a 5 out of 5 that could be checked off. Much of this, determining all of this and these conditions happened in a really short span of time. I think somewhere around 20 minutes. Another example, in aborted Mount Jefferson, which was a non-AMC hike, the group met at the Cog Railway parking lot to hike the Jewel Trail to Mount Jefferson. The forecast was for good climbing conditions, but after we got above tree line, the clouds lowered and started to impact our visibility. Then the trail became harder to follow. The cairns blended into the surroundings. The trail required more packing out, thus slowing our pace. We also became concerned about following the trail to return safely. So as for facet, the fun factor started to diminish. Our ability to continue became more difficult due to trail conditions and weather, and time would have become a factor. A common thread you may have observed from these examples was the domino effect of environmental hazards. When trail conditions and weather get bad, fun, ability, and time are all affected. Winter incidents. Over time, I have experienced a number of trail hazards. On one occasion, I was invited to join several REI employees on a winter climb of Mount Musalak. At one point, we had to go off trail to get around some blowdowns. I stepped on a small stump hidden in the snow. The stump went through the space in my snowshoe between my foot and the outer part of the snowshoe. This caused me to do a forward face plant on the ground in front of me. I felt pinned down and could not move without some assistance. If I had been hiking solo, it could have been a serious problem. Coming down Mount Washington on another trip, I took a very unexpected slide, stretching my groin muscles on one side, but not seriously. I was wearing monster-sized steel crampons at the time with nearly 2-inch spikes. How could this happen? Well, it turned out that wet snow had balled up under them, compromising their use. Then a short time later, as I approached the lake's hut and got on the path I had ascended, my left foot stepped a couple of inches off the trail. It sunk down to above my knee. It was like half of a spruce trap, but if both feet had sunk in, it would have been a total spruce trap if both feet had gone in. And it usually requires another person to help pull you out in that situation. But since my right foot was fine, I was able to extricate myself. It turned out that this section of trail was not the actual Ammonoosuc Trail. It was an alternate path created by previous hikers who missed a sharp right-hand turn on the official trail. This is something that if you are planning to hike the Ammonoosuc Trail, you should be aware of this because it happens every winter. The first snowstorm, there are 2 right-hand turns. The first right-hand turn, it's no big deal because if you miss that, you'll come back on the trail. The second one, though, if you miss that right-hand turn, you wind up down in the drainage area. You have to be really careful with alternate trails created after a winter snowfall. Carter Dome. On an AMC hike to Carter Dome, I started out as a participant. The person in front of me took a fall coming off a slight bypass embankment. He had a soft landing on his side and some snow that covered up an inch or two of slowly moving water. I asked him if he was all right, and he indicated he was. Suddenly, a woman we had just passed on the trail abruptly jumped into action and took over the accident scene. She introduced herself as a leader for the Pemigewasset Valley Search and Rescue Team. Now, what are the chances of that happening? Well, she wanted to check the accident victim to determine if he had gotten wet. A ground pad was made available for the accident victim to sit down on. When she checked his pants on the side touching the ground, they were wet, and she asked him if he had any extra clothes to change into, but he did not. Since she then clearly stated that he could not continue on this hike and had to return to the trailhead, one of the co-leaders and another participant accompanied him back to the trailhead. Since I was a winter leader, I stepped in as the second co-leader so that the hike could continue. There are several takeaways from this incident. It illustrates in winter conditions how important it is for hikers to not continue hiking if they get wet, even partially. If they cannot change into dry clothes immediately, they need to abort the hike. If he'd continued with the group, it could have become more serious as we ascended into colder and windier conditions. The risk of hypothermia. It also illustrates how subtle an accident can be. Only one leg on one side got wet from extremely shallow water. Another takeaway is that in this kind of situation, a strong leader needs to take charge and to not let the participant talk their way out of it. And finally, it shows the advantage of having three co-leaders so that the hike could continue. But despite the hazards and risks of leading a winter hike, there are fun activities that can only happen in winter. Butt sliding is one of them. This was a butt slide on the Jackson-Webster Trail. By far the best butt slide I've ever experienced was off of South Hancock. It began on the summit and lasted for a long time, covering most of the descent. The track had been previously established. I had complete control of my speed, and it seemed like at the time the safest and fastest way to get down off the mountain. Another activity is getting a great view and photo of the Presidential Mountains. This is the view of the Prezzies from Mount Hale. For those of you who have been to the summit of Mount Hale in the summer, or better yet in winter, do you recall getting a view like this? Well, guess what? You wouldn't normally. The summit is surrounded by spruce trees blocking your view in almost every direction. No, I haven't done photo trickery here. The photo is legit, but now let me show you where it was taken from.
Yeah.
Apparently, several people got together and built this snow mound structure with a series of snow blocks piled over a very large snowdrift or cairn to raise the level of where you could stand to get this stunning view of the Prezzies. The fire tower that used to be here certainly had this great view. To finish up, here are a couple of suggestions for further education and experience. The AMC New Hampshire Chapter Winter School. They have what may be the most comprehensive set of courses offered by an AMC chapter. Last year, they offered a 3-day session twice, once in January and the other in February. Both sessions had 5 different classes covering almost every aspect of winter backcountry travel. There was one class on leadership and mountain skills, and you may want to speak to Nancy Tutko, who's taken this class. International Mountain Climbing School, IMCS as they're known, is based in North Conway, New Hampshire. They offer a range of courses focused on winter mountain skills. I've taken several courses with them. They also teach winter camping skills. However, they do not appear to offer winter leadership course. And finally, the SCM Introduction to Winter Hiking series. This is a plug to be involved with the series. If you're currently a winter hike leader, this is an excellent opportunity to build on your experience by helping out with the series, which culminates with a climb of a New Hampshire 4,000 footer. If you're not yet a winter leader, step into it. Start by co-leading, learn from others, and seek out further training. Here's a list of what I have in the handout, the cliff notes that I mentioned earlier, the leader extra gear list for emergency a wind chill chart that I'm sure you've seen before. And then there's a description of some wind terms that you often will see in forecasts, terms like breezy, blustery, and windy, and what those actually mean in terms of miles per hour of wind. And finally, identifying and treating hypothermia, frostbite, and frost nip. In conclusion, leading a winter hike has unique challenges, keeping a close eye on participants, managing time wisely, working with special gear, and sometimes navigating tough weather and terrain. It's about balancing risks with sound judgment to keep everyone safe. Led well, it becomes an opportunity to create unforgettable experiences. I think at this point, we can do the Q&A. And if you want the handout, would just send me an email indicating you want the handout, and I'll put together a list and send it out.